So in this video, we're going to go over the exercise 1 problem in chapter 6. And by reading the problem first, we can see that this company called Alu Company is trying to make a loan, and the bank called Premier Bank and Trust is considering for giving Alu Company a loan. So their major concern is their inventory account on Alu's company, which balanced $207,000 in December 31st. It says year-end balance, so the balance is December 31st balance. So we have to decide or determine whether $207,000 is the correct amount in December 31st. So there are 5 information given. And starting from number 1, we're going to see if the number is correct. So in this question, we have to consider who has the ownership, who owns. This is our primary concern here. Who owns the inventory? Okay, so number 1, it says Alu sold goods costing $38,000 to Comerica Company, freight on board, shipping point, right? So on December 28th. So number 1, December 28th, because it's freight on board, shipping point, the ownership transfers to the client, Comerica Company. Okay, so the inventory amount should not be included in the year balance. So in December 31st inventory amount should be reduced already, because the amount will be reduced on December 28th. So it says the goods are not expected to arrive at Comerica Company until January 12th. The goods were not included in physical inventory because they were not in the warehouse. Yep. Okay. So even though the goods arrive to Comerica Company on the January 12th, because they used freight on board the shipping point, the ownership already transferred from Alu to Comerica. So ownership of this inventory amount belongs to Comerica Company starting from December 28th. Okay, and it says the goods were not included, so this is correct in the physical inventory because they were not in the warehouse. So this is correct. So number 1, there is no change because it's correct. Okay, let's go to number 2. Number 2, it says what does it say? It says that the physical count of the inventory did not include goods costing $91,000 that were shipped to Alu freight on board destination on December 27th and were still in transit at year end. Okay, it says the important information we can see here is that it was freight on board destination, and now we're seeing that shipped to Alu. So now number 1, Alu was the seller. Now Alu is the buyer, right? So Alu is receiving some product from another company on December 27th. So on December 27th, and it says it was still in transit. And so FOB destination, we know that the ownership transfers when the product reaches the customer right next to the door. Okay, so when the product reaches customer, the ownership transfers. The ownership transfers when the product reaches the door. Okay, so and you can see that it is still in transit. So on December 12th, it is still in transit. That means it is still being shipped. It is still carried by a truck or container, a container um, crossing the border or something else. So it has not reached it. It hasn't reached uh, a Lu company yet. So the ownership, the ownership, ownership still remains with the seller. So we can say that this inventory should not be included in a Lu's inventory account, right? Because it's a freight on board destination and Alu is a buyer, so the ownership still remains with the seller. And it says the physical count of the inventory did not include goods costing 91,000. So that is correct. Okay. So number 2, no adjustment. No adjustment should be made. And for number 3, let's go to number 3. Alu received goods costing $25,000 on January 2. The goods were shipped freight on board shipping point on December 26 by Grant Corporation. The goods were not included in the physical count. Well, now you see that freight on board shipping point, the goods were shipped freight on board shipping point to Alu, right? So because Alu received goods, so that means the ownership has passed on to Alu on December 26. So Alu inventory account amount should be increased by this amount, $25,000. But it says the goods were not included in the physical count. So some adjustments should be made in number 3. So we should make what? We should increase the inventory amount by $25,000. Okay, and let's go to number 4. Alu sold goods costing $35,000 to Emery Corporation, freight on board destination. Now is Alu in the selling? Alu is selling to Emery Corporation, freight on board destination. That means Alu has the ownership until the product reaches the Emery Corporation. So December 30th. So Alu sold the good December 30th, and the goods were received at Emery on January 8th. So, and they were not included in Alu's physical inventory. Since ownership still remains with the Alu, we have to include the amount $35,000 amount in the Alu's inventory account. Okay, so we have to. But it says what? It says they were not included in Alu's physical inventory on what? On December 31st. So we should increase this amount because the ownership still remains with Alu. Okay. And number 5, Alu received goods costing $44,000 on January 2nd that were shipped from on board shipping point on December 29th. The shipment was a rush order that was supposed to arrive December 31st. This purchase was included in the ending inventory of $297,000. Um, so Alu now is a buyer again, has received the goods costing $44,000 on January 2nd that were shipped freight on boat shipping point on December 29. So December 29, it was shipped freight on board shipping point, so the ownership transfers on December 29th. Okay? So number 5, ownership transfers December 29th, right? The shipment was a rush order that was supposed to arrive at December 31st. So the shipment was supposed to arrive at December 31st, but it turns out they arrived at January 2nd. But does that matter? Does that matter? The ownership has already transferred on December 29th. Okay. So the date of receiving the product does not really matter because it's freight on board shipping point. So this amount should be included, right, in the year-end balance. This amount this $44,000. So $44,000 should be included in the year-end amount, inventory amount. Let's see what it says. It says that this purchase was included in the ending inventory of $297,000. As we have expected, this amount was included, so there should be no adjustment. Should be no adjustment. So accumulating, just going over all the informations given, we're not supposed to make adjustment for 1 and 2. We only have to consider these two amounts. So we have to add these two numbers with the year-end balance, and it will give us the correct inventory amount, which is $357,000. Okay, so in this question we have to know when there is a transfer of ownership. Okay, so when the ownership transfers, the inventory amount should be also transferred, and there should be changes. Okay, that's it for this.